430. That is the number of albums ATEEZ sold on their debut day. I bet a lot of people never would have thought they'd become one of the highest grossing and most successful groups in the history of K-pop. Yet, here they are, somehow defining their legacy with historic records, sold-out global stadium tours, and absolute chart dominance. Heck, they are even headlining festivals most K-pop acts never even get invited to. If you look at them today, it's easy to see how their talent and passion would take them where they are now. Like, everything was meant to be. But there was never really any guarantee. This is a story of what it actually takes to survive in a cutthroat industry. A story about a letter nobody answered, a debut barely anyone noticed, and 8 people who chose to keep going anyway. This is the story of ATEEZ, and the long, uncertain road that got them here. In 2013, a small company named 7 Seasons was created for a single, hyper-specific purpose: to manage the hip-hop group Block B after they parted ways with their old label. And for years, 7 Seasons existed as a single artist label. There were no talent development teams, no public auditions, or even a trainee program to receive rookies. In other words, they had absolutely no plans to manufacture or debut a new idol group, or new trainees for that matter. But that didn't stop a teenager named Kim Hong-jung, who deeply loved Block B's music, from taking his chances anyway. Never mind that the agency wasn't holding auditions. He burned a demo CD of his own self-composed songs, wrote a letter to go with it, and mailed the whole thing straight to the label. But, as you might have guessed, it was a dead end. The letter was set aside and remained unopened for a whole year. But, in a real stroke of luck, it got found. Around that same time, the agency was going through a massive restructure. It widened itself out under a brand new name in 2016, KQ Entertainment. And somewhere in the middle of packing up the old building for the move, someone stumbled on the forgotten CD. They pressed play, and, well, the rest is history. Or should I say, destiny. Because not long after, the CEO made a call, brought Hong-jung in, and signed him as KQ's very first official trainee. Being the first trainee at any company sounds, on paper, like an honor. But at the time, KQ Entertainment was so green, they didn't even have a standard training curriculum, and Hong-jung trained alone for 6 whole months.
6개월 동안 이제 윤호가 들어오기 전까지 나 혼자 했어. 나는 그 생각을 했어. 나 몰래, 그러니까 약간 멀티버스처럼 나 몰래 다른 연습실에 애들을 이제 한 명씩 키우고 나중에 이렇게 다 만나가지고 3개월까지 그 생각을 했지. 근데 그러고 있다. 근데 3개월 지나 4개월부터 사기당했다.
Also, KQ did not have much industry pull at the time, and they couldn't manufacture a lineup through massive nationwide casting calls the way the bigger labels could. The group, when it came together, was built through a string of coincidences and deliberate choices. Take Yunho and Mingi, for example. They met at a dance academy as kids and clicked within hours. Years later, they both decided to audition for KQ independently. Neither of them told the other they were doing it, but they both ended up at the exact same company as accepted trainees. The case of Yeosang and Wooyoung, on the other hand, is a story of friendship. The two trained together at Big Hit Entertainment, the same company that in just a few years would become one of the biggest K-pop agencies. But in 2016, none of that had happened yet, and there was no new boy group in sight, and no clear sign one was coming. So, Yeosang left. 6 different agencies tried to sign him after he left, but he chose KQ Entertainment, which at the time was a far less proven agency than the company that already had BTS. Shortly after, Wooyoung left Big Hit and followed Yeosang to KQ. And for him, that wasn't a small thing. You see, Wooyoung was a huge BTS fan, and Big Hit had been his dream company. But he walked away from it anyway. Not for a better offer, nor for any other reason. Just for his friend. San's story is a quieter one, at least at the start. His father ran a taekwondo studio in Namhae, and it was actually one of his father's own students, a trot singer, who first got San an audition at KQ. The problem is, compared to the rest of the guys in the room, he barely knew how to dance. His first audition, by his own group's account, was rough enough that it's still brought up as a joke today. But what he lacked in technique, he made up for with the work ethic and discipline he learned from his father. It took years, but by 2024, his growth as a performer was undeniable that the group itself made it official, naming him one of ATEEZ's main dancers. Seungwa's road is one of quiet determination. He failed audition after audition for almost 2 years. Each one probably a little more proof to himself that he didn't belong in a practice room at all. So, in his 3rd year of high school, he did something drastic. He went straight to Seoul with no real plan, nor guarantee of anything. Thankfully, he found an academy there, and its director saw something in him, enough to let him in without the usual fee. And that same academy director also told him a story about another trainee his age, one that pretty much lit a fire in him.
그 원장님이 저한테 너랑 같은 나이 친구인데 일찍 회사를 들어간 친구가 있어. 근데 그 친구는 정말 많은 노력을 했고 지금 회사에 들어가서도 누구보다 뒤처지지 않게 연습을 하고 있다.
So for the next year, he spent his weekdays finishing high school in Jinju, and his weekends back and forth to Seoul, preparing for a shot he hadn't gotten yet. And right at the end of his senior year, it paid off and KQ Entertainment accepted him. Seungwa didn't know it yet, but the trainee in that story was the same person waiting for him on the other side of KQ's door, a trainee by the name of Kim Hong-jung.
근데 그게 홍중이었다는 게 약간 신기하기도 하면서 운명인가 싶기도 하고.
And finally, we have Jongho, the group's maknae. He was a trainee at another company called Top Media. And even though he is the youngest member of the group, he actually has one of the longest overall training periods because he started so young. But somewhere around age 14, people told him they didn't want to hear him sing.
저는 잘 하고 있다고 생각을 했었어요. 근데 주변에서 너 그렇게 노래 부를 거면 노래하지 마라. 너 듣기 싫다. 이 얘기를 정말 많이 들었어요. 그 중학교 3학년 그 시기에. 그래서 그거를 듣고 제 혼자 스스로서 좀 충격을 많이 받아가지고 그냥 진짜 키보드 앞에 앉아서 선생님이랑 발성 연습만 거의 한 1, 2년 하고 진짜 옛날 노래부터 차근차근 올라가서.
But instead of getting discouraged or stopping singing completely, he spent the next year or two doing nothing but vocal training, working back through old songs from scratch, one at a time. By the time he was around 16, he was out of Top Media and decided to take a break from the industry entirely. But the break only lasted about a week because KQ invited him for an audition. And when he walked in, he sang a song he'd made up with a friend over lunch, less than an hour earlier. He was impressive enough that even after doing something a little reckless, he was in. So, there it is. 8 roads converging into one room. Seemingly more than just an accident. Together they began training. For now, under a temporary name, KQ Fellas. But none of them had any idea how hard the road ahead would actually be. The K-pop trainee system is notoriously brutal. You go through endless hours of practice, experience constant criticism, and the pressure to perform at the highest level is intense. Then you wake up the next morning and do it all over again. But perhaps the most exhausting part wasn't the physical labor, it was the psychological weight. They were pushing their bodies to the absolute limit, and they had no idea when or even if they would ever actually debut. And while most idols experience some version of that anxiety, it is especially heavy when you are training at a small, unproven agency. I mean, KQ Entertainment had never built an idol group from scratch before. But all that grinding had to be for something eventually, right? In late 2017, Hongjung, Mingi, Wooyoung, and Jongho got a shot at something bigger than exposure. They were sent to compete on Mix 9, a nationally televised survival show backed by YG Entertainment, one of Korea's biggest agencies. And the prize wasn't just recognition. The show existed to form one brand new group, debuting with YG's own backing, pulled from hundreds of trainees across dozens of companies. But the thing is, winning would have meant they would be folded into a different group, under a different company, built by someone else. None of that matters though, because all four were eliminated before the show ended. Except calling it a loss isn't quite right. They didn't know it yet, but that loss might have been the best thing that ever happened to them. You see, the team that actually won never debuted at all. The deal collapsed months later over a contract dispute, canceled before they ever released a single song. For KQ Entertainment, having all 8 boys back was exactly what they needed, because they were about to place a real bet on them. In early 2018, KQ made a plan to send the boys to the US for training. The problem is, they were a little strapped for cash, and the executives were stuck on how to make it work. The CEO decided to do it anyway, reaching into his own pocket to send the members to the US as planned. Honestly, this kind of move is kind of unusual for someone with a CEO title. I mean, most companies chase the fastest possible return. Instead, he was betting his own money on 8 kids, with no guarantee any of it would ever pay off. So, the boys packed their bags and spent a month training at Millennium Dance Complex in Los Angeles, the same studio where names like Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake had once trained. And not long after, they released a small batch of dance covers to the world. On May 18th, 2018, they dropped a performance video set to Famous Dex's Pick It Up. And it absolutely exploded, garnering over 25 million views on YouTube to date. Mind you, this all happened while they were still trainees. Their hard work paid off, and maybe that's what convinced KQ they were ready. On October 24th, 2018, KQ Fellas became ATEEZ. They released their debut EP Treasure, led by the song Pirate King and Treasure on the same day. And then, reality set in. 430 copies sold on the first day, and just a few thousand after the first week. For context, Iced One, a group who debuted a few days after them, sold 34,000 copies on their first day alone. Stray Kids, debuting that same year under JYP, sold more in their first week than ATEEZ would sell in months. And on top of that, even promoting wasn't easy either. Without massive corporate leverage, small agency groups often have to fight just to get airtime on music shows. The pre-recording slots, the standard way any group gets seen performing a new song, kept going to someone else. Sometimes their performances got trimmed down mid-broadcast or even got cut entirely.
기업들 나와버리잖아. 우리 중소기업들 사전 녹화 그냥 밀려 알지?
저희는 사전 녹화도 못했어요. 생방송도 초수 잘리고.
초수 나 바로 날라가. 알지 야.
They had the talent, and they were riding a massive momentum from their viral performance. But after all that, this is where they actually stood. And if nothing changed, they'd probably fade into obscurity. Getting seen in Korea is tough. I mean, it's super tough. But ATEEZ and KQ didn't just sit around waiting for those domestic broadcast walls to come down. They partnered with My Music Taste, a platform that plans concerts based on fan demand, and announced the Expedition Tour. For context, My Music Taste aggregates fan requests, basically a simple, free vote for an artist to come to their city, and uses that data to gauge real demand before booking anything. The plan is simple. Plan a tour based on wherever that demand actually showed up. First, it was just 5 cities in the US, mostly stages that could hold around 800 people, and every single show sold out. So they expanded to Europe, and then Australia, not long after. And with each stop, the crowds got bigger. In fact, by the time they reached Melbourne, they were playing Margaret Court Arena, a venue nearly 10 times the size of where they'd started. They were gaining momentum. And that momentum didn't just stay overseas. Somewhere in the middle of it, it washed all the way back to Seoul. On June 20th, 2019, less than a year after their debut, they secured their very first music show win with their song Wave on M Countdown, beating out veteran act Lee High in a close final score. And it wasn't the last one either. Just 5 days later, they won again, edging out SF9 and WJSN in a three-way race on the show. Now, for most of these music shows, the mechanics are pretty similar. Nominees are ranked by a combined score built from physical sales, broadcast points, and live fan voting. The scores were pretty close, but this just goes to show that they have support, not just overseas, but domestically too. And it just kept snowballing. In July 2019, 8 months after their debut, RCA Records, the label behind artists like Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, signed ATEEZ specifically to handle their promotion in the US. Then in October of that same year, their song Wonderland landed them their first ever #1 on Korea's domestic album chart. And they did it again in January 2020, when their song Answer became their second straight #1 in Korea. Everything was clicking for them, and everything was getting bigger, maybe even faster than anyone expected. In early 2020, ATEEZ announced their second world tour, The Fellowship. It opened in Seoul with 2 sold-out nights. And then they were planning to head to Europe, Japan, and the US next. This tour was on track to sell over 100,000 tickets, the highest total for a rookie group in K-pop history at the time. But then, almost overnight, venues closed, borders shut, and travel everywhere ground to a halt. All of it got postponed, one after another, with no clear timeline for when or if any of it would actually happen. So, they adapted. In May 2020, they put together a free virtual concert called Crescent Party as a way to keep showing up for their fans anyway. And over 1.4 million people showed up to watch. Weeks later, on June 26th, they opened and closed for K-Contact, a massive week-long virtual K-pop festival alongside other idols in the industry. And they kept releasing music. Zero Fever came out that July, becoming their first ever album certified platinum by the Korea Music Content Association. The tour was gone, but somehow everything else kept growing. In December 2020, ATEEZ was invited to compete on Mnet's Kingdom Legendary War, airing the following spring. And in many ways, it feels like this was a direct test against groups with more experience, bigger fandoms, and far more institutional backing. They had debuted just 2 years earlier, making them the youngest name in the entire lineup. And they were against groups heavily supported by the industry's largest agencies like iKON and Stray Kids, or groups with nearly a decade more experience like B2B and SF9. The lineup even included the boys, who were the reigning champions from the show's own preliminary season. I think it's fair to say, to stand a chance, they had to be better than they'd ever been. But the Kingdom show wasn't the only thing on their plate. Around the same time they were still wrapping up promotions for their comeback, Yo Song, on the other hand, was co-hosting a weekly music show, and 4 members had also committed to a drama called Imitation, premiering that same spring. On top of that, Mingi was still on hiatus, recovering from psychological anxiety, leaving a physical and emotional void on stage. But despite all that, they delivered some of the most impressive performances of the whole show. In fact, they were consistently ranking high in the competition, and looked like they had a chance to win it all. Now, ATEEZ didn't take first place overall on the show, but honestly, the final rank didn't matter. What Kingdom gave them was a 10-week nationally televised resume. If I were to describe ATEEZ, it would be that they are relentless. They were constantly performing, constantly improving, and constantly releasing new songs and new albums. And in September 2021, just 3 months after the Kingdom finale, ATEEZ released their next EP, Zero Fever Part 3. Same routine as every release before it. Except this time, it's not quite the same. The album debuts at number 42 on the Billboard 200, their first appearance on that chart ever. And within hours, the hashtag ATEEZ on BB200 were trending worldwide across Twitter. Their lead single, Deja Vu, also performed incredibly well, peaking at number 4 on Billboard's World Digital Songs chart and topping the iTunes Top Songs chart at number 1 in at least 16 regions. It took them 3 years to get to this point, but really it's more than just that. And you know what? They're just getting started. A single chart entry was already more than they'd ever had. But one breakthrough doesn't guarantee anything. I mean, the music industry is full of one-hit wonders, artists who broke through once and were never heard from again. But ATEEZ? They weren't just a fluke. In the summer of 2022, their album The World EP1 shot to number 3 on the Billboard 200, giving them their first ever top 10 in the chart. A few months later, Spin Off landed at number 7, and The World EP2 pushed the ceiling even further, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and hitting number 1 on Billboard's top album sales chart that same month. Then, by December 2023, they closed out the series with Will, and it secured ATEEZ's first ever number 1 on the Billboard 200. By 2024, the wins weren't just about the charts anymore. That April, ATEEZ stood on the mound at Dodger Stadium, invited to throw out the first pitch at a Major League Baseball game. That same year, the Grammy Museum put together its first ever K-pop exhibit, and ATEEZ, alongside their label mates Xikers, were the ones chosen for it. Later that year, they also became the first K-pop group ever to headline Mawazine, one of the largest music festivals in the world. And by February 2025, they were the first K-pop artist ever to headline a solo concert at Paris's La Défense Arena, the largest indoor venue in all of Europe. But none of this would have happened without the group of people who'd been there from the very beginning. Back in November 2018, barely 3 weeks after their debut, ATEEZ had earned themselves a small but very loyal fan base. So they asked their fans to suggest a name, held a live broadcast, and ended up with a name that combined ATEEZ with destiny. ATINY. They were the ones who supported them before the trophies, the charts, or even before the recognition they'd eventually earned. The ones who bought the tickets when barely anyone knew about them. The ones who voted for them to win award shows. The ones who streamed the songs long before those songs meant anything to anyone else. And the ones who posted, shared, and made noise in every corner of the internet they could reach, just so somebody, anybody might notice. It's not a stretch to say that because of their support, ATEEZ got noticed by more than just everyday fans. They caught the attention of players inside the industry. People like the organizers of the largest, highest profile music festivals in the United States, the Coachella. And mind you, this was in the same city where they trained for a month back in 2018. In April 2024, they came back, but this time to perform on one of the biggest stages in the world and become the first K-pop boy group in the festival's history to do it. And KQ Entertainment, a small agency with no track record of launching a new group, whose CEO once paid out of his own pocket just to send trainees to LA, has since grown its revenue past 115 billion won, and even launched a second global group to follow in ATEEZ's footsteps. Usually this is the part of the story where a K-pop group splinters. The company grows, the money comes pouring, solo endeavors boom, and staying together stops being the obvious choice. And that's just a few of the reasons why. You see, only a tiny fraction of K-pop groups ever survive past their first contract with their complete original lineup intact. Heck, many of them disband before they even reach a renewal decision at all. But in July 2025, all 8 members of ATEEZ chose to stay together, renewing their contracts for another 7 years and becoming one of the few idol groups to ever pull that off. ATEEZ has come a long way since the days their segment could get cut from a broadcast without warning and without any say in the matter. They went from only managing to sell 430 copies of their album on the first day to June 26, 2026, where they sold over 1.8 million copies in a single week. And to really put that scale into perspective, that same week they outsold the next 30 best-selling albums in the US combined. Coincidence may have led these 8 guys to a small agency through a dusty demo CD. But the hard work and the drive to keep going was a choice. And maybe it was always up to you.